Good evening. Welcome to Focusing on You, a webcast sponsored by Hope Abounds. My name is Lisa Cawthorne, and I will be your hostess for the evening, and I will be asking our guests some questions so that we can learn more about cancer survivorship. Hope Abounds is an organization that provides financial assistance, emotional support, and education for folks in North Carolina, women and children and their families. You can listen to our live broadcasts on the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month at 7 p.m. You can find that on our website, which is hopeabounds.org, or on Facebook. I also want to tell you that you can find us through YouTube if you type in Hope Abounds Inc. So that's different than hopeabounds.org. Also on Roku, you can find us at Hope Abounds Inc. and also our app, the Hope Abounds app. So this evening we're here with Catherine Hankins. She's a registered dietitian. She is an outpatient dietitian through Zimmer, and she is also a certified specialty in oncology. So, Catherine, we're going to talk about healthy eating, which can be a little challenging during the holidays, or maybe not. I don't know. Yep. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you do in your job?
Sure. So, like you said, I'm the dietitian at the Zimmer Cancer Center. I work with all of our patients that are either getting ready to go through treatment, are in treatment, or out of treatment. And so I talk to them about nutrition and the importance of nutrition as they go through treatment, and then as they finish treatment to help with the healing process. We know that nutrition plays a huge role in helping a patient get through treatment and then heal beyond treatment in good shape. And so we kind of look at where they are at nutritionally coming into treatment and help them make some changes and help them to eat healthier and better so that they have a better outcome.
Nice.
Yeah.
So if we sort of break it down into different phases, someone who's just newly diagnosed with cancer, what are some of the things that you talk to them about?
So I take a look at their eating habits and kind of see again where they're currently coming from in terms of the types of foods that they eat. Are they eating enough protein? Are they eating a lot of sugary foods? Do they only eat once a day? So we kind of look at the habits and the behaviors that they're currently having. And a lot of the patients that are coming into treatment have experienced some weight loss because they haven't felt good. So we also take a look at that and kind of how they're feeling and how their body's responding to food. And then use that as a starting point, and then I help them to understand that as they go through treatment, they need more protein, they need more fluid, they need to eat probably more often through the day. We help manage some of those side effects that come through treatment, which is kind of jumping into the treatment phase. But some of those side effects are already experiencing the loss of appetite, maybe feeling full more quickly, so they're not eating enough at one time. And so again, we just kind of look at where they're at and then help them move from there to make sure they maintain a good nutrition status then as they go through treatment.
And as someone's going through treatment, you briefly mentioned some of the things that people might go through.
Yep.
Another thing is maybe smell and tastes are different. So how do you approach those challenges that folks might have during treatment?
So probably the changes in smell and taste are the most challenging for the patient as well as for me. We have medication to control nausea. We have medication to help you move your bowels. We don't have anything that at least we know of at this point that can help make food taste like it's supposed to taste. So there are some things that patients have tried. There are some things that I know about. There's some things that I've learned about from other patients that may work for the patient that I'm talking to. But a lot of it is just really kind of figuring out what works for you. And sometimes what it comes down to is that you just have to eat even though the food doesn't taste right. And just really kind of more thinking of your food like your medicine, and knowing that you've got to have that, and you've got to have that fuel in your body to keep it going. Which is it's a hard thing. People, you don't want to eat when it doesn't taste right or it doesn't smell right, but sometimes that's kind of what it comes down to.
I like the term thinking of food as medicine, because that really should be a lifelong mantra for all of us.
Absolutely.
To think of food being medicine.
Well, and I really try, I have some patients that come in and they have a really healthy diet and they really understand, what they technically should be eating. Now that may be messed up once the chemo starts, but they have some good nutrition knowledge. I have patients then that come in that, it's been a free-for-all through their life. They just eat whatever, and either they just don't know, it's just lack of knowledge, or, they kind of know and they eat anyway. But I really try. I know some of the patients go in and they see the doctor, and the doctor's like, you're on chemo. We don't want you to lose weight. Eat anything you want to eat. And I'm really of the philosophy that I don't really agree with that as much as, yes, you probably need to eat more. But I think that even through treatment, whether it be chemo or radiation or an oral medication, that it's an opportunity for me as a dietitian to help teach patients and help them kind of start incorporating some of those healthy eating habits into their diet, whether they can do it a lot or a little bit, but at least do some education so that when they finish treatment, that at least they'll have some knowledge that maybe they didn't have coming into treatment. Because we know that, things like obesity and some eating a really high-fat diet or a high-sugar diet can increase the chance of cancer recurrence. So, I feel like if I can help educate these patients while they're going through treatment, that, maybe on the backside of all of that, they'll eat better and have less chance of recurrence.
So it sounds like you want to make sure that the calories count, that they're not what we call, or maybe I don't know if they still use that term, empty calories, right?
I tell my patients, I'm like, you want to get the biggest bang for the buck out of the foods that you eat. So you want to get the most protein, you want to get the best kind of calories, you want to get, good vitamins and minerals. You want to make everything, especially if you don't have much of an appetite, you really want to make the food and the drink that you put in your mouth to count.
So what is your feeling on these maybe nutrition shakes or nutrition drinks or additives, different things like that? Could you talk about that a little bit in the context of food and diet?
So, I have patients that struggle with eating, and sometimes it's easier to drink your nutrition at that point than it is to eat a plate of food. And so there's lots of options for oral nutrition supplements. You've got everything from the Ensure and the Boost and the Carnation Instant Breakfast, and then there's, others. But I think I try to gear patients toward those that are a little healthier, more like the ones that don't maybe have quite as much sugar in them. But the caveat to that is that sometimes, in order to get somebody to get adequate nutrition in, if they hate those other choices but they love Ensure, go ahead and drink the Ensure.
Right.
That's okay. So it really is kind of a case-by-case basis. But just so people know, there are some other choices. There's one that's called Orgain. That's a non-GMO, organic, lower sugar supplement.
Orgain. O-R-G-A-I-N. G-A-I-N. Okay.
There's one that I drink every morning that a lot of my patients drink and called Premier Protein. That you can get at Costco or at Sam's, or even I think they have it at Walmart, or you can get all of that on Amazon Prime if you're an online shopper. But it's basically something like the Premier Protein it's got 30 grams of protein in it per, I think it's a 10-ounce container. But there's not a lot of sugar. There's not a lot of extra stuff in it. But while I'm getting patients to increase their protein through treatment, it's a good way to
And adding
that
protein powder maybe to blended drinks, that's
Yep.
also helpful.
And I usually
for folks.
recommend whey protein powder, WHEY protein powder, just because it's the most available protein to the body. I do have patients that don't want, whey is a byproduct of milk, so like the curds in the whey. So I have patients that don't want an animal protein powder, so they use things like the pea protein or a soy protein, and that's fine to do. It's just not as readily available in the body as the whey protein powder is.
Oh,
so again, there's lots of choices, and I try really just to kind of see what the patient wants to do. Sometimes the patient will come in and say, okay, I'm not going to eat any sugar, I'm not going to eat any blah, 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 at the beginning of treatment, and then I say, okay, well, we can work with that, but then they get to a point where they're not eating well, and we kind of have to adjust that and tweak that a little bit along the way.
Right. Well, there's probably too much sugar in all of our diets, whether or not we have cancer or not.
Yeah.
I think the New York Times just came out with a big article about how sugar is not our friend. Well, it's like it never really has been unless it's a natural sugar, right?
Right. So just to clear up a myth, sugar does not feed cancer. It does not directly feed cancer. And I have a lot of patients that come in, and that's what they've heard, and that's what they've seen on the internet. But there's not a direct correlation between cancer and then making the cancer cell worse. There is a connection between sugar and our body's insulin levels and tumor growth, and that's something that research is really looking hard at. So what I tell patients is that, a moderate amount of sugar. Now, when I say moderate, the recommendation for sugar, so this is added sugar, not natural sugar like we find in fruits or in dairy products. So for added sugar for females, the recommendation is no more than 9 teaspoons a day. So that's going to be, so let's say you have a 12-ounce can of Coke.
Okay.
So in that 12-ounce can of Coke, there is the equivalent of about 8 packets, like the packets you get in a restaurant, of sugar.
Okay.
And each of those packets has about 5 grams of sugar in it. So that's about 40 grams of sugar in that one soda. The recommendation for the day is 9 grams.
So
right there,
you could have about a fourth of a cup.
Yeah, just like a little
Coke a day.
Exactly.
Do I dare ask about sweet tea?
So it depends on how you make
Wilmington, North Carolina.
It depends on how you make your sweet tea and how much sugar you add to it. But just kind of keep in mind that every teaspoon of sugar, which is about how much is in one of those sugar packets you get in a restaurant, has 5 grams of sugar in it. So if you're adding a cup of sugar to your tea and you're making a pitcher of tea this big, then you're still getting, you might be getting the equivalent of what you would get in a soda in your sweet tea. But for men, so it's 9 grams for women. I think it's like 12 grams or maybe 15 for men. It's a little bit more.
That's not fair.
I know, right?
I just want to put that out there.
I totally understand.
It's not fair.
So then you have to consider, okay, whenever you eat processed food, if there's any, corn syrup solids or any brown sugar or any of those other types of sugar, then you're still getting some in those processed foods too. So it's very easy, and especially this time of the year, it's very easy to go way over the recommended amount of sugar.
Probably the sweet potatoes you would say would be okay, but the added sugar and the marshmallows on top.
Right, you'd have to count that into your 9 teaspoons for the day.
Right, which wouldn't go very far.
It really wouldn't.
But on the other hand, it is the holidays.
Right.
And we don't typically eat like that every day.
Right.
So around the holidays, is there advice that you give folks? Because you may be in charge of cooking, which may be difficult, or you may be going to family gatherings and they're wondering why you don't eat like you normally do. They may be trying to feed you, or what sort of advice do you talk with your patients about?
So I think during the holidays, you really have to practice mindful eating as opposed to mindless eating, like when you sit and watch TV and you're just eating chips out of the bag and you know, the commercial comes on, you realize you've eaten half of the bag of chips. But yeah, we're in situations all through the holidays, probably from Halloween to Christmas, especially from Thanksgiving to Christmas.
I had somebody that said it was the beginning at Halloween and it ends at Easter, which I was a little taken aback by that, by the amount of
that's
sweets.
like half the year.
I know.
Yeah, exactly. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
I know, I distracted you with all the sugar.
It's okay. So what I was going to say was, I mean, there's always food around. We have, at the Cancer Center, case in point, is we have precious patients that we adore, and they love to feed us. And it's kind of like when you have, you know, when you have family or when you have friends over, you feed them. That's what you do. Right. And so our patients will bring food to us. And so from pretty much Thanksgiving to the first of the year, there's always something around, and usually it's sweets or, you know, popcorn or whatever it might be. And, you know, so every time you pass by wherever it's sitting, you know, you grab a cookie or you grab a handful of whatever it is. And when you do that day after day after day, it tends to add up. But, you know, I think there's some things that you can kind of strategically do as you go through the holiday season to, you know, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You know, you don't have to look at it and say, okay, I'm not going to eat any sweets through the holiday, or I'm just going to throw caution to the wind and eat whatever I want to eat. There can be a happy medium with that, just by making some decisions and, again, practicing that mindful eating and saying, okay, when I go to this party, I'm going to skip the alcohol, but I'm going to have a piece of pie, or, you know.
Or try to fill up on vegetables first.
Right.
Before you hit some of the other plates on there.
So for a buffet, for instance, if you hit like the cheese and the meat tray first and eat a little bit of that and get that protein in, and then kind of fill up with the vegetables and things like that, then maybe the sweets won't be quite so tempting, or when you have sweets, maybe won't eat quite as much. So, yeah.
And so are there ways that you could advise people to sort of alter some of the favorite recipes that people have so that it becomes healthier for all of us? Not just people undergoing treatment or cancer survivors, but to make it healthier for all of us. I have to tell you, though, I tried the green bean casserole with the reduced fat mushroom soup. It was terrible. So maybe you can give me a better way.
Was it reduced fat and reduced sodium?
Yes, it was.
Oh, yeah. Maybe do one or the other. Probably just reduced fat.
That's right. Or make it from scratch. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, there's, you know, and there's lots of, if you get online and you look at like the American Institute for Cancer Research website.
Oh, nice.
They have lots of recipes, especially around the holidays, for ways that you can adjust typical recipes, your stuffing recipe or your gravy recipe or your pumpkin pie recipe. And sometimes it's just changing one ingredient that nobody even realizes that you've changed that can make it a little bit healthier.
Like now, Greek yogurt for sour cream, or do you ever recommend anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a big taste difference unless you're using it in a recipe.
Right.
But, you know, you can use something like quinoa. Have you ever tried quinoa before?
I have. Will you explain to everybody what quinoa is?
So first of all, I'm going to spell it because it's spelled differently than it sounds. So it's Quinoa. It looks like quinoa, but it's pronounced quinoa. It's a whole grain that you can use pretty much anywhere you use rice. It's got a little different texture because it is a whole grain and it's not been stripped away of as much of the grain as rice has. So it's a tad bit chewier.
Okay.
But using it in a casserole, so if you're making a rice casserole, you know, or something with rice in it, even substituting half the rice for quinoa, you're going to get a healthier grain product. And people probably won't even know that you've made that change.
And it has more protein in it,
too, does have more protein.
That's what I remember was really important about that.
Yeah, and most of the whole grains, again, when the grain goes through processing, you know, I'm from Kansas, so I'm used to the wheat fields. And so you see the wheat growing, and it has all these things sticking out and all these little seeds and everything. And so as it goes through the processing, the more processing it goes through, the more of that they strip away. Well, the more they strip away, the more nutrients they're stripping away. So you're getting a more refined product. So you're not getting as much benefit to eating that as you would if it were not as stripped away of all of the nutrients. And so they also tend to have a little bit more protein too, along with more fiber and more vitamins and minerals.
Right. And what about sugar versus fake sugar, we'll call it? What are your thoughts on that? Because I know there's some talk about
that's a
that
huge
too.
controversy. And so it kind of depends on the amount of sugar that you're going to use. If you just use a teaspoon of sugar in your coffee in the morning and that's all the sugar you use, I would just say use real sugar. If you're the person that uses 4 teaspoons of sugar in your coffee, or you eat lots of sugary things through the day, then I would consider using some type of sugar substitute. So then we have to start back with like the Sweet and Low and the NutraSweet, kind of the first line, older ones that now we have much better substitutes. So then we went into the Splenda, which is actually the sugar molecule has just been modified so it doesn't absorb into your bloodstream. So it's actual sugar, it's just been modified.
Okay.
Well, now we have things like the Truvia, which is from the stevia plant, which is an even better substitute. And then there are some even beyond that. So I would say the more like sugar it is, the better.
Okay.
Or the more, no, let me take that back. So some of the sweeteners that we have on the market now are significantly sweeter than like cane sugar is, so you use less of them.
Oh, okay.
So that would be the case kind of the stevia and some of those other ones. So I personally would recommend something more along those lines.
Okay, so
did that make sense?
Yes,
okay.
It does.
Sorry, that was a long
I like the
explanation.
Probably the blue, yellow, and pink packets not as good as some of the newer ones. That's what I'm. That's the takeaway from that.
Yes, that was my point. Sorry.
So let me ask you about foods that maybe someone during active treatment should avoid.
Okay.
Are there any foods that people should stay away from during active treatment, chemotherapy, for instance?
Yes. So from a preventing foodborne illness standpoint,
there you go.
When you go through chemotherapy, your immune system's not as strong, and so we tell you, you're more prone to catch a cold if you're around somebody that's coughing. Well, the same thing can happen with certain foods that you eat. There are certain foods that tend to carry bacteria that tend to cause more foodborne illness.
Do I want to know about this now? Should we just stop before I hear about this?
No, it's okay. Unless you like rare steak, then
okay.
So things like undercooked meats. So if you like rare steak or rare burgers, undercooked eggs. So if you like sunny side up eggs, raw oysters, and which is always a hard one for people to hear because it's like it's oyster season. But those foods tend, when they're not cooked all the way through, to carry bacteria that may make you sick or more prone to being sick. And then with a weakened immune system, your body's not able to fight off that bacteria as well. And so what I tell my patients is that it's more prevention than anything. I don't want you to end up with food poisoning on top of how you're already feeling from the chemotherapy. To me, that's just kind of adding insult to injury. So just, wait for that rare steak until you finish treatment and then
celebrate.
Yeah, and then celebrate. And then just as a recommendation, we usually recommend that patients stay away from buffets at restaurants and salad bars. Now, if you're going to a party at someone's house and, you know them and the food's been, we think properly cooked and stored and everything, then I don't see any harm in eating off their buffet table. But at restaurants, there's just a lot of hands going in and out of the buffet.
Buffet line, yes. And what about fresh fruits and vegetables? Is there any limitation while folks are on treatment for that?
So I just encourage patients to wash fresh fruits and vegetables well. You do not have to avoid them. Just wash them well. There is a list, and I can have it posted on the website if you'd like. There's a list of the Dirty Dozen. I don't know if you've seen that or know
I've heard
of
about
it.
that before.
So it lists the 12 fruits and vegetables that tend to be the most contaminated in terms of bacteria and other things that they might use in the growing process. So those are kind of the 12 things they recommend.
Strawberries, I think, is always on the list.
Apples are on there. So the recommendation is that if you're going to buy organically, those are the fruits and vegetables that are better to buy organically. So, yeah. But other than that, just, and people say, well, should I get a special fruit and vegetable wash, or how should I do it? Just, warm water, and maybe just get a dedicated fruit and vegetable scrub brush that you just use for fruits and vegetables, and just wash them.
Okay.
And that should be fine.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about, I don't want to call them alternative diets, but maybe diets that are touted as this is going to cure your cancer. This is the best diet for you. Could you explain maybe what some of those diets are in
Mm-hmm.
general, and things for folks to sort of be aware of when we're evaluating those diets?
I think the first thing you have to remember is anybody can put anything on the internet. I could make up the craziest diet, make a website, put it on the internet, say, hey, this worked for me. I had cancer, now I'm cured. And you would read it and think, oh, that's a great way to go. And it could be something like totally wacky. So that's the first thing to remember. And the second thing is that a lot of these diets that are on the internet have not been researched, and a lot of them are not nutritionally complete. So they may eliminate certain food groups, maybe one food group, maybe two food groups. There's a couple of diets that promote coffee enemas, which there's no scientific basis for using a coffee enema. There's
it can actually be difficult because it draws electrolytes out of your body.
You dehydrated, and exactly. So that's a good point, is that some of these diets actually can be dangerous and cause more problems and more side effects just because of the type of things that they're having you do. So I think when folks look at those, you really have to evaluate them and not just think, okay, well, they had this study group of 10 people that did this and their cancer was cured. Because they can also twist research, they can twist what they say. Unfortunately, with cancer patients, they tend to, companies and individuals tend to kind of prey on them in terms of, everybody wants to be healed.
Vulnerability.
Yeah, exactly. And you want, I totally get that. You totally, you want to find something that's going to work and that's going to cure your cancer. And people know that. So they put all kinds of stuff with not just diets, but also with vitamin and mineral supplements and herbal supplements. So you just have to be really careful and do your research. And if you don't really know what you're getting into, ask your oncologist, or call me at the cancer center, and I'm glad to to look at what you're looking at and kind of talk you through it and see, hey, this is a good thing. This part of it's good. This part of it, this can be the side effect. I do that with my patients all the time, so I'm happy to do that.
And you mentioned protein, so sometimes those diets are missing enough protein, which you said is very important.
Yeah, so your body needs about 1.5 times the amount of protein that it normally needs. So for you, for instance, your normal protein need would be around 50 grams of protein a day.
Okay.
If you're going through cancer treatment, then your protein needs would be somewhere around 80 grams
and
a
what
day.
is that equivalent to? Like, if you can
Yeah, absolutely.
translate that for us so we know how much that equals?
So let's talk about where protein comes from first of all.
Okay.
So you find protein in anything that comes from an animal. So any meats, whether it be beef or pork or chicken or fish, dairy products contain protein, eggs contain protein. So any product of an animal will have protein in it. Vegetable proteins include beans and nuts and nut butters like peanut butter, almond butter, things like that. So that's kind of where you're getting most of your protein. Vegetables have a little bit of protein, not a whole lot, but those other sources are more major sources of protein. So I have a list that I give my patients that list out some common proteins and then how many grams of protein per a particular serving. And again, if anyone's interested and wants that list, I'd be glad to send it to them over the email or, in the mail, whichever. But so for instance, 3 ounces of meat is about the size of the palm of my hand.
Okay.
And in that 3 ounces of meat, there's around 20 grams of protein. So there's about 7 grams per ounce of meat, so 21 grams of protein. That's true for beef, it's true for chicken, it's true for fish, it's true for any meat protein. Something like an egg has around 6 grams of protein. A couple tablespoons of peanut butter have around 6 grams of protein. So when you look at a food label, on the food label is listed, at the very top there's going to be the calories per serving. And then on down, if you scroll on down, it'll give you the protein, and the protein is always listed in grams. And so I give my patients a goal for protein so that when they look at protein supplements or when they're trying to kind of figure out if they're eating enough protein, they have that goal in mind and can use it when they go to the grocery store or when they look at different products. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And what about... I had a patient tell me today, she said, I'm going to cut out red meat. Now, is there a problem with that, or?
There's not a problem with that as long as you are using some other type of protein.
Okay.
A lot of my patients find that, especially when they go through chemotherapy, that they don't digest red meat and pork maybe as well as they used to. It's a little bit harder for your stomach to digest. So, chicken and fish are good alternatives. If you don't even like chicken and fish or that doesn't taste good to you, then you really have to be mindful of getting dairy products in or getting more nuts in using a protein supplement to get your protein. And the reason that the protein is so important is because if you're not eating enough, then, and especially if you're losing weight as you go through treatment, your body's taking protein out of your muscles and it's burning it for energy to keep your body fueled. And the more muscle loss you have, the more it puts you at risk for malnutrition, dehydration, you don't move around as well, and it's harder for the body to heal after treatment. So the protein as well as maintaining your weight, both are important.
I worked with a dietitian once because I have a background in oncology nursing, and she said, if the gut works, we always use it. So it sounds like you really work with folks to figure out a way to get the best nutrition for them, no matter what, because tube feeding is not fun, nor is getting fed through your veins. So it's best to try to eat if you can.
Right. And even if the majority of your intake is fluid, but you're getting high calorie, high protein fluids, then we can work with that. I have a lot of patients, especially that have things like head and neck cancer that are going through radiation and chemotherapy, and it becomes very difficult for them to eat, and so we come up with liquid ways they can get their nutrition in. So there's always ways. We just sometimes have to experiment a little bit and figure out what works for each patient.
So the flip side of that is a lot of breast cancer patients, unfortunately, because we need one more thing to worry about, gain weight during treatment.
Yep.
And I know that they've had difficulty sort of pinpointing, is it being thrown into menopause early, or is it the medications that are given? And what sort of advice do you have for people that gain weight during cancer treatment?
So those are the patients that I probably work with the most through treatment, just really helping them to adjust their eating habits to where they're not eating a lot of excess sugar, they're not eating a lot of excess fat. You know, for some of my patients, again, that are struggling with eating and you know, we have to do something different. But with a lot of the breast cancer patients, it's more just managing their diet and teaching them good eating habits, getting them to eat more whole grains, getting them to eat less total fat or less total sugar. And that can be done even through treatment. There's some research out there that says, you know, typically I tell my patients we want you to maintain your weight through treatment. With the breast cancer patients, though, there's some research to show that losing a pound or two of weight, even while you're going through treatment, is not detrimental. And if you've got, now, if you're somebody that's really tiny, you don't need to lose weight, that's a different story.
Right.
But because obesity is such a big risk factor for cancer recurrence, the research is showing that with breast cancer patients that might be overweight, that losing a little bit of weight through treatment in the long run can actually be really beneficial in helping prevent recurrence.
So we focused on the food a lot, but along with that is also trying to be active.
Right.
So I don't know how much you tell your folks about that, but I always say, even if you can walk to the mailbox and back, if you can walk around the block, continue walking your dog, whatever you can do to stay active. And there's our regional director in Raleigh, Kim Wellens. She ran every day during her breast cancer treatment. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I could do that, but she did, and she felt great because of it.
And some people can do that. I mean, if that's, it kind of depends on what your baseline is for activity before you start treatment. If you weren't a runner before you started treatment, you know, chances are that running is probably not what you're going to do as you go through treatment. But, you know, I think that, you know, anytime you can get up and move, it's going to help mentally. It's going to help physically with your digestion. It's going to help move your bowels, which a lot of times people end up with some constipation because of some of the side effect medicine or pain medicine. So many good reasons to do that. This time of the year, again, when you're faced with maybe some food choices that you don't normally have, or you eat a little bit more than you normally eat, sometimes you can kind of balance that out by exercising or by walking or, you know, being more active. So all around, it goes right hand in hand with nutrition.
Well, I'd like to say we're going to shift from patients undergoing active treatment to those who've completed treatment.
Okay.
But really, it sounds like a lot of the advice you're giving is healthy eating, healthy eating, healthy eating. So as somebody transitions into that phase of not having treatment anymore, how do you sort of send them off on their nutrition highway?
So I always encourage patients to continue with the higher protein for at least a few months after they finish treatment, just to help the body heal. And then they can, you know, lower it down to kind of that regular protein recommendation. But I think in general, eating a diet a little bit higher in protein, especially if you're struggling with your weight and you're trying to lose some weight, eating a diet that's a little bit higher in protein and lower in carbohydrate, not void of carbohydrate, but a little bit lower in carbohydrate.
And higher fiber.
Can help. Higher fiber. Yep. So in general, a healthy diet would consist of fruits and vegetables, preferably fresh fruits and vegetables to get the extra fiber and the extra nutrients. Whole grain breads and cereals, so high fiber. The quinoa is one of the those other high fiber breads and cereals. The whole grain breads, the high fiber cereals, lean meats or meat substitutes, so more chicken and fish, less fried meats, less meats that are covered with sauce and things like that. And then low-fat dairy products, Yogurt is always a really good one for all of us, just because it's got good bacteria in it, that especially after you've finished chemotherapy, that chemo has just kind of done a number on the bacteria in your stomach and through your colon. And so eating yogurt or drinking kefir or some product that has a lot of those.
And kefir is
It's a fermented grain product. It tastes very similar to yogurt. It's like drinking your yogurt.
Oh, interesting.
You can find it at you can find it easily at places like Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, but even Walmart has some versions of it, and you find it where you find the yogurt. But it's a fermented product that has pre and probiotic bacteria in it, and those are bacteria that can go into your system and help.
That's the good bacteria, right?
It helps to supplement the good bacteria that's there and helps it to grow and to multiply so that your digestive tract is healthier.
So it's not just any yogurt. They would have to read on the label.
You want it to say made with live and active cultures.
Okay.
And sometimes it's on the label about like this big and you have to squint or put your reading glasses on. But most yogurts now, especially most Greek yogurts, have the live and active bacteria in there.
Okay.
So that's kind of what makes up a healthy diet, just as the framework of that. And then, limiting sugar intake, like we talked about.
Drink more water.
Drink more water, limiting added fats and using healthier fats like olive oil or, some of the ones that aren't saturated. Some of the, I just drew a blank, but olive oil would be a popular
avocado.
one. Yeah, avocados, things like nuts and things like that, exactly. So that's kind of what makes up the framework, and then just adjusting portion sizes and so that you either maintain your weight or if you need to do that, or you lose some weight if you need to do that, or I have patients that finish treatment and they need to gain some weight back. So it just kind of depends on where you're at the end of treatment.
Right. And so that one website you talked about that's done a lot of research, American Institute for Cancer Research. I think it's AICR.org.
I think so. I think
that's what that is.
Yeah.
I know at one time they were sending out you could sign up on an email listing and you would get recipes and things like that. But
you can sign up for their newsletter. So just go to their website and look for the spot where it says sign up for newsletter, and they'll send you, I can't remember how often I get stuff from them, but I get recipes all of the time. And I've tried some of them, and I think some of them are really, really good. I actually went to a workshop that they sponsored that was it was like going to a 3-day cooking class.
Oh, nice.
And we were able to make some of the recipes that they put out in their newsletter and kind of learn how to incorporate some of these healthier foods into the products that foods that we normally make.
Substituting for rice and things like that.
So, how to incorporate more cruciferous vegetables, which are things like broccoli and coleslaw, and they have some really good nutrients in them. So learning how to kind of incorporate those into a salad or into a way that, people would enjoy and they would
how to cook chicken in the oven so it's still very flavorful, not fried,
exactly,
which we all love. But
or even how to fry it, how to kind of fake fry it and still have a coating on it, but bake it instead of dumping it in the fryer.
Nice. So then, on an ongoing basis, do you still see patients after they've completed treatment, or are they sort of off and on their way after that?
That's an excellent question, and that's something that as a cancer center we're working toward more that survivorship piece, because we know that we feel like we do a good job supporting patients, especially during treatment. And then, you finish treatment and you may not come back to see your doctor for a month. And I think sometimes patients are like, okay, what do I do now? And so that survivorship piece is something that we as a cancer center are working hard to get in place so patients don't feel like, okay, we've just left them on their own. right now I'm the only dietitian at the Cancer Center. Hopefully I will have some help in the near future. And so I want to work with that piece also, and maybe try to do some classes or some things where patients can come after they've finished treatment and still get nutrition information and nutrition support. Sometimes I'll see patients when they come back for their checkups. They always have my number and can call me if they have any questions. Nice. So I'm always open to answering emails and answering questions. So.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you so much for all the knowledge that you've shared, and I appreciate that on a personal level too. Sure. I think we should all be trying to work towards that food as medicine no matter where we are in our lives. And it's not just cancer that food is medicine for. There's cardiac conditions and diabetes and hypertension and the list goes on. But it sounds like overall you really try to give some very practical and concrete advice to get folks started.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you for being with
you're
us
welcome.
this evening. That was wonderful. So in closing this evening, I do want to tell you again how you can access our programs. I'm going to look at my notes. It's through the Roku. Hope Abounds has an app called Hope Abounds Inc. You can search that. Also on YouTube, if you search hopeabounds.inc. Our website is the .org, hopeabounds.org. So we do our live programs on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month. The Tuesday after that, it will be rebroadcast, and again, you can access it through the various means that I said. So please join us at our next live broadcast, which will be the 4th Tuesday of the month. And I thank you so much for being with us this evening as we talked about healthy eating. And I thank you again, Catherine, for all your expertise.
I've enjoyed it.